My name is Kaniah Konkoly-Thege, and as Mark said, I'm the Chief Legal Officer for Quantinuum. Really quick, I would be remiss not to mention for myself and really every panelist here, what we're going to talk about today is not intended to be legal advice. It's really just intended to be general information. If you have specific questions about your company, I recommend you talk to outside counsel or your legal counsel. Okay, with that, as I mentioned, I work for Quantinuum. We are a full stack quantum computing company. We provide hardware, software, algorithm development, and cybersecurity solutions. And we have locations across the world between the US, UK, Europe, Germany, and Tokyo. Now, I wanted to just give that basic lay of the land because it really becomes important for us as a global company to talk through one of my favorite topics, which is export control. So if you're in the quantum computing industry, you will inevitably encounter a discussion around export control. And you might be thinking, why? I don't sell products, I'm not shipping things, why do I care? Well, I like to start with this quote from the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, from September of this year. And he identified several technologies, including quantum computers, as being force multipliers throughout the tech ecosystem. And consequently, he said that it is critical for the US to maintain leadership in this ecosystem. And that was really a national security imperative. Very recently, the US has imposed some Russian sanctions, and he identified that those technology export controls are really important in serving as more than just a preventative tool. And most importantly, he said, if implemented in the right way, you have robust, durable, and comprehensive export controls. They can be a strategic asset in the United States and allies' toolkit for imposing costs on adversaries and even over time, degrading their capabilities. Why is this important and why do you care? Because export control really impacts more than just the end product. So first, let me take a moment and talk through the three base regulators who provide support. You have Department of State. That's where you hear terms like ITAR. That really falls into military controls. You have Department of Commerce. That's the EAR. You have really dual controls there, commodities that can be used in both military applications or commercial. And then Department of Treasury, and they really regulate the destination, embargoes, et cetera. And as I mentioned, these regulations fall in either protection of the product, the destination, or who the end user is, or the end use. Now, an export is more than just a physical shipment of items. It also includes a release of technical data or potential software code to a foreign person. This becomes important because a foreign person is defined as anyone other than a US citizen or permanent resident alien, even if they are living in the United States. Now, I'll touch on this a little bit later when we talk about employment law, but I do think this is an important area to look at. Finally, the thing I wanted to touch on is for companies today, there's no unilateral controls on quantum computers as of the date of this recording, but there are certain restrictions that exist for controls around algorithms that the security is based off post-quantum cryptography. And as I mentioned earlier, the US and several other companies have imposed restrictions against certain Chinese entities and against Russia for very specific quantum computing controls. That includes computers, processing units, circuits, devices, control components, measurement devices, and cryogenic systems. So it's really, really important to stay up to date on what the US and other countries are doing as you continue to grow your business. The second area I wanted to mention is around CFIUS. As Mark mentioned, this comes into play as you start to do a fundraise. So what is CFIUS? It's the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, and it's made up of about 9 federal agencies that, again, this interagency committee, and they're authorized to review these transactions where there's a potential for a foreign entity, a foreign business, a foreign person to have control in the US. This process right now is voluntary. However, the process, the government can pull your transaction in, and the full process can take over 90 days. And that is really, really critical for startups who are really looking for cash infusion to think about, because it can be 3 to 4 months before you're ready to go through this process that you need to get your house in order. And then there's the outcome. So you can have the potential of clearing the transaction in total, You can clear with a potential mitigation, which means that you might get a national security agreement or some other type of agreement that may limit your ability to fully operate. Or in very rare occasions, you can have an actual prohibition against the transaction. So finally, and it's important to note on CFIUS that this includes mergers, acquisitions, joint ventures, leases. Again, as I mentioned, foreign person is defined very broadly, and control is defined very broadly. So make sure you're paying attention to that. The other area we wanted to talk through is workforce and employment. Now, employment law impacts every business, from the proper hiring practices all the way through employment and to termination. So you really need to make sure you're tied out with your Labor and Employment Council in any of these areas. But what becomes a little bit more unique for quantum computing companies is around deemed export. As I mentioned, under the export rules, a deemed export is when you basically share your technology with a foreign person, even if they're in the United States. This does not mean that you can just choose not to hire foreign nationals, as there's a number of discriminatory laws against that. So you really need to make sure you're checking with outside counsel and considering the type of position that you have, whether it needs to needs exposure to this type of information, and whether you can wall off the person while you're looking to get a license. With that, I will turn it over to the next speaker. Thank you.